Finding purpose in pain. God's redemptive work. Pain is a universal human experience. We all face it at some point in our lives, whether it's physical, emotional, or spiritual. But what do we do when we're in the midst of pain? How do we find purpose in the midst of suffering? As believers, we know that God is sovereign and that He is working all things together for our good. But it's easy to wonder how that can be true when we're in the midst of pain. How can God be working for our good when we're feeling so lost and alone? The answer lies in the redemptive work of God. God is not just a God of creation, but also a God of redemption. He is the God who takes the broken and makes it whole. He is the God who takes the pain and turns it into purpose. In the book of Job, we see a man who is facing unimaginable pain and suffering. He loses his family, his health, and his wealth, all in a matter of days. But despite his pain, Job never curses God. Job's story is a powerful reminder that even in the midst of pain, we can find purpose in God's redemptive work. God is not just a God of creation, but also a God of redemption. He is the God who takes the broken and makes it whole. Throughout the Bible, we see countless examples of God's redemptive work. From the Israelites' exodus from Egypt to the resurrection of Jesus, God has consistently demonstrated His ability to take the most difficult and painful situations and use them for His glory and our good. When we're in the midst of pain, it can be easy to feel like God has abandoned us or that He doesn't care about our suffering. But the truth is, God is always at work, even in the darkest of times. He is the God who sees our pain, who hears our cries, and who is actively working to redeem and restore us. So how do we find purpose in pain? How do we find God's redemptive work in the midst of suffering? 1. Trust in God's sovereignty. We must trust that God is sovereign and that He is working all things together for our good. This doesn't mean that we won't face pain and suffering, but it means that we can trust that God is working in and through our pain to bring about good. When we're in the midst of pain, it can be tempting to question God's goodness or to doubt His love for us. But the truth is, God's sovereignty is not dependent on our circumstances. He is the all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-loving God who is in control of all things. As we learn to trust in God's sovereignty, we can find peace and comfort in the knowledge that He is working for our good, even when we can't see it. As we learn to trust in God's sovereignty, we can find peace and comfort in the knowledge that He is working for our good, even when we can't see it. We can rest in the assurance that He is guiding us, protecting us, and using our pain for a greater purpose. 2. Look to God's Word. We must look to God's Word for comfort and guidance. The Bible is full of stories of people who faced pain and suffering, but who also found purpose in God's redemptive work. When we're in the midst of pain, it can be easy to feel alone and isolated. But the stories in the Bible remind us that we are not the only ones who have faced difficult circumstances. From the Israelites' slavery in Egypt to the disciples' persecution for their faith, the Bible is filled with examples of people who found hope and purpose in the midst of their suffering. As we read and meditate on these stories, we can find encouragement and inspiration. We can see how God used the pain and suffering of His people to bring about greater good, and we can trust that He is doing the same in our lives. 3. Pray and seek God's guidance. We must pray and seek God's guidance in the midst of pain. We must ask God to show us His redemptive work in our lives and to give us the strength and courage to trust in Him. When we're in the midst of pain, it can be easy to feel like we're alone and that God has abandoned us. But the truth is, God is always with us, and He is always ready to hear our prayers. As we pour out our hearts to God, we can find comfort and strength in His presence. We can ask Him to reveal His purpose in our pain, to give us the wisdom and discernment to see His hand at work, and to fill us with the courage and faith to trust in His plan. 4. Find purpose in serving others. We must find purpose in serving others. When we are in the midst of pain, it's easy to become focused on our own struggles and to forget about the needs of others. But God calls us to serve others, even in the midst of our own pain. One of the most powerful ways to find purpose in pain is to use our experiences to help and encourage others who are going through similar struggles. When we share our stories of God's redemptive work in our lives, we can offer hope and inspiration to those who are feeling lost and alone. Whether it's volunteering at a local charity, mentoring someone who is going through a difficult time, or simply offering a listening ear and a compassionate heart, serving others can help us to shift our focus away from our own pain and to find purpose in the midst of our suffering. Finding purpose in pain is not easy. It requires trust, faith, and a willingness to look to God's Word for guidance. But when we do, we can find purpose in God's redemptive work. We can find comfort in the knowledge that God is sovereign and that He is working all things together for our good. So the next time you're facing pain and suffering, remember that God is working in and through your pain to bring about good. Trust in His sovereignty, look to His Word for comfort, pray for guidance, and find purpose in serving others. And always remember that God is the God of redemption, who takes the broken and makes it whole.